really cool. So how many, I always like to start kind of this broad question of how many people know what conservation districts are and what they do, just by a show of hands. Hopefully the people, the staff that are here with me today know what you're supposed to be doing, right? But you'd be surprised as to how many people have never really heard of us, right? Or know that we offer a lot of services to the community. And so while I'm here representing Benton and Franklin Conservation Districts today, I mean, go to your local conservation district, wherever you are located, and they can help you with a lot of the same things. So I'll just kind of give you a little conservation district 101, because there was some people that were not raising their hands when it comes to knowing what conservation districts are. And broadly, we provide a lot of technical services to members of the community, residents in our county, to help implement conservation practices. So we're really focused on the sustainable and responsible stewardship of those natural resources for our residents and providing those community services. We pride ourselves on the conservation of all natural resources while promoting agricultural viability. We also seek voluntary cooperation, partnerships, and are active in leadership in our community when it comes to conservation. We like to provide excellent customer service and have open communication and provide a lot of education resources to our community. We also pride ourselves at aiming to be really proactive in problem solving, conducting some research, and being on the forefront of a lot of agricultural innovations in terms of conservation practices. And we also like to have high integrity and conduct ourselves really professionally and show a very responsible use of public funds, because we are, while we fund a lot of our services with a lot of grants, we also utilize public funds in a lot of ways. So at our conservation districts in Benton and Franklin counties, we offer a lot of different outreach and education opportunities, whether it's teaching students in a classroom or having workshops to help teach farmers new practices and farm tours that connects a lot of our funding pools with the actual projects on the ground. We also offer services to people in residential and urban spaces with the Heritage Garden program, though that's not exclusive to residential areas. It is something that is taken off in those communities. Small farm and ag, we offer all sorts of consultation services and support in projects, all sorts of, we love to talk to y'all. We just want to help you get your things done. We also do work in restoration and research, some of that environmental monitoring, and we tie it all back to that outreach that we do. So I like to say that conservation starts with a conversation. For us, we'd really like to talk with producers and figure out what your goals are, and that's usually done over a site visit. So we're out there looking at the things that you're doing and identifying some of those resource challenges and concerns, and figuring out what those opportunities are and what your goals are. Where do you see yourself in the future? Because you might not come to us for just one project you expect to implement in the next year, but you might be future tripping a little bit, and you want to think about where you want to end up in 10 years, 20 years down the road, and we can kind of help you get there. From there, we might develop a project. And depending on how we go about funding it and helping you fund it, or if you want to fund it to yourself, you might have some different things you need to navigate. And that might be a number of resources that pertain to a change in practice or into that specific project. It could be going and getting funding. It could also be in development of a conservation plan or developing logistics and timelines for how you're going to get that project or that practice implemented. And what's really cool about the conservation district is we have access not only to a lot of top-down funding sources, but we also pride ourselves on being able to build projects from the bottom up. And so that is figuring out what your needs are and then going out and finding the grants to help fund you in doing that. And conservation really happens when you start to implement those projects. So we can also help you source materials, get in touch with different people and make different partnerships. We can help facilitate some of those permits and surveys if the project calls for it. And then just be that person on the other end of the phone when you're doing the project, that if you have a question or you've run into something where you can't quite figure out how it's supposed to go into the next step, we can be there to support you through that. And of course, long-term success, because nobody wants to put a project in and then see it just kind of go by the wayside, right? So we can help you in getting resources on maintenance and provide guidance on how those things should fit the design standards through the long term. We can also assess those impacts and outcomes of a project or a different management strategy. We can help you adaptively manage your approach. So if you run into something along the way that you're kind of at this fork in the road, we can help you make that decision or just give you the resources to help you decide which direction to go. And then what's next? We like to refer them in the office as gateway practices or projects, but there are some things that are paired practices or just a project that leads to the next project, right? And so that's often where we can help you. But hopefully part of what's next, and I'll do a little shameless plug, is that we put, or you decide to put your conservation practices or your projects into the Land Steward Showcase, which will be launching in June. It is a mapping platform where we want to show off what y'all do. And a big part of that is showing the community as well how much conservation actually happens on private lands. And so it's gonna be really cool. So I'm excited about that one. So before I kind of go into some other specific things that we might be looking at in irrigated perennial crops, are there any questions about what conservation districts do? Or did I pretty much cover it?
So
Yeah, go ahead.
is your Land Steward Showcase statewide or just your district?
And if
So-
you could repeat the question.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the question was, is this going to be statewide as a platform or as just our two districts? And for this, it's going to be for Benton and Franklin counties combined. Other conservation districts have done platforms like this for their VSP programs to get people to enter their stewardship data that they do without assistance or without regulation telling them to do so. And again, to show off how much is going on in the community. So this will just be ours, but there are others that are active in other counties as well. Anything else? Yeah.
Will the landowner have an opportunity to say, keep my private persons?
Absolutely. Yes.
What was the question?
So the question was, can I keep my information private? And that's yes. So more than we want you to show off your things, we just want to know what's going on out there. And so we will have the option. It'll be the first question is, do you want to show it off or do you want to keep it private? And so from there, that'll dictate what goes on the actual map for people to see. So, any other questions about this or conservation districts in general? So fruiting crops in hop yards, some of the natural resource concerns that are pretty common. The main themes are water availability and how that ties in often with soil health, which is why we're all here today. The elements, so those extreme shocks, whether it's in the markets or in the environment, could be cold, heat, drought, and definitely fire in a lot of cases that many of our local producers are familiar with at this point. And then also pest management and weed control. And these things seem separate, but they're all very interconnected. So keeping that in mind, some of those common conservation practices are listed here. And I'm not going to go through every single one of them because they might apply to you, but they might not. But there are a lot of them out there, and these are all associated with different funding sources that are available right now. And so whether it's a top-down program, some of these practices are listed as options for producers to participate in and receive some sort of cost share or support, or there are other grants out there that we can apply for that focus on some of these elements. But what's great about conservation districts is we also have a lot of room for innovation, and we advise our projects and plans based on what you need. And so if you don't quite fit the check boxes in some top-down programs, we can go and we can find another place to help you out. But coming back to the conversation part, because that's how it all starts, right? It's in our conversations that you all really help us continue to offer the best services to our communities. And so from you, we start to understand those challenges that you are experiencing whether they're current, where you see them going in the future and how they've kind of changed over time. And we can also glean from you how that impacts your resilience to those unpredictable things, those shocks. It also helps us refine our training and education, both that we do in-house and those things that we can provide to the public. There might be new practices, new technology, new industry developments, and we like to stay on top of those things. And the more that we can talk to you about where you want to go and the things you're trying out, the better we can offer those things to other people as well. And if you're reading text a lot, which a lot of producers are, and learning how to adapt to that unpredictability, right? As we start to see things come up in trends, we can start to put together educational programs around those topics to bring you more in-person workshops and learning opportunities. So that's really fun. And then at the end of it all, there's lots of opportunity for collaboration and partnerships. We get an understanding of who's engaging, how they're engaging, and to what level. And then we can also help to identify other potential opportunities. And so I kept it under time, so that's perfect. Are there any real questions on that? I think my big message is just hop into your conservation districts and start those conversations with people, because that's how we can really start to build the things that you need, the projects, and then, if enough demand comes up in certain areas, we can start to build programs around those things, so.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I'll have Devin come back up too, and then we'll have questions for both of you guys. Any questions? Don't be shy. We'll answer them. I guess one for, we have them back, great.
Yeah, I was curious what species are in your cover crops in the undervine.
We're using a subterranean clover. It's the adult heath variety for the undervine legume. We selected it for a variety of reasons, but it's low growth habit and self-reseeding for why we selected it. We're using high crested wheatgrass for our in tractor row cover crop in our mixed in our most aggressive treatment. So yeah, sadly we can't do more cover crop trials in that main block, but anyway, it's a challenge with these long-term ag research sites is that if you want the research to continue for 30 years, you have to be really careful of how you manage the main research sites. Because if you split them up too much or you try to do too many experiments, then you lose power. So,
Devin, how are you measuring the soil microbiome?
So, great question. So we're starting using phospholipid fatty acid analysis, which is an interesting analysis. So we're looking at phospholipids from microbes in the soil. It tells us what's there right now compared to DNA or 16S rRNA gene analysis. That gives us more of a legacy microbial community. It's like a blurrier snapshot. While the phospholipid fatty acids give us a really tight snapshot right now what's in our soil. So we're using that to estimate both microbial biomass and distribution between bacterial and fungal species.
So are you guys doing that in-house or do you send it somewhere?
We send it out to University of Missouri. Yeah.
So for all the producers and growers in here, if someone wanted to do more conservation practices, implement some type of soil health, they hear about soil health research, say they have a vineyard, they want to do cover crops or add in something else, and could they go to you? Could they go to the conservation district, and what happens? Be like, they know nothing and they need hand holding, but they're not going to admit it. Can you hold their hand and help them through that?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what we're here for. We're the local hubs of knowledge. We aim to just kind of sit there and listen and glean what we can, and then try to develop, information that we can for you and tools, and it's our goal to help you get to where you want to be, right? Especially.
So what would that look like? Would that look like helping them write up a plan, what to look into, what might be good for their vineyard cropping system, whatever they have? Maybe look into a project,
Yeah, I mean, all of those things, yeah, and so usually they come to us with kind of an idea, it's not often that you get people walking in the door and saying, I don't know what I want, tell me, you know? They have some idea, they've looked into some things, and so we can help them by identifying different programs to apply for grants for, so that there is potential for cost share, because we know that putting up that money is a huge risk for a lot of people. Change is hard, and so when you're trying to do that, you have to be patient, but you also have to have the resources in place to do it, right? And so, yeah, I mean, they tend to come in, they wanna know, maybe it's just, I want to cover crop, I don't know what I should do, we can help you figure that out, and make sure it fits with what your goals are, right? We can't broadly recommend one thing for every place, your soils are different, your climate might be a little bit different. You know, what you're growing is different, what you're growing it for is different, what your quality of life is different, right? And so you're trying to factor in all of those things, which are the bigger picture of sustainability, right? The economic, social, and environmental. And so we try to factor all those things in when we help you on your way to where you want to be.
That's great, thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah.
I have a question for Devin. So I know that's the point of the whole research project is to figure it out, but what do you have the most hope for as a practice that maybe is not being used that would be both beneficial to the grower and for the long-term soil health?
Yeah, I mean, so one, like, our simplest practice is moving away from basically barren under vine areas and just letting resident vegetation crop up. What we found is that if you mow often, and we see this at the station, like if you go out to any of the vineyards around here where they're mowing under vine, basically you end up with like a brome undergrowth. And so it's from a soil health perspective, there's roots in the ground, the soil's covered, and when that happens, like other things occur. So you'll get like worms and other insects that will populate under there. And you know, it's something to consider in terms of you could have nuisance insects that move in, but a lot of times if you're selecting for really like low growing things, it's hard for them to move up into the vines. And that's what we see around here, or like on the station when we're implementing these practices. So that's like the thing I'm most hopeful for. A lot of growers have expressed that they don't want to like clean up under their vine. They just want to go out, mow, and be done with it. They want 4 to 4 cover, and I think it's doable. And like the most straightforward thing to do out of like all the other practices. Thanks, good question.
Still have time for another question?
I have a question, and it involves amendments. We, especially Yakima Valley, we have a lot of availability of nutrients like dairy compost, that sort of thing, but there's not a really good avenue for that to be directly given to the grower. Are you able to, with the conservation district, are you able to navigate that space and start connecting those dots and get those two pieces connected so those vineyards can take advantage of a cheap source of compost?
Do you want me to repeat that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we're looking for creating connections between nutrient sources and those that might use those on their croplands. Yeah. And so we don't have that really, it's not something that we don't have a Facebook for that. We've tried doing like a page of an organic exchange, and for some reasons it just doesn't quite take off. But it's not to say that we're not looking into it more, because internally we have our own projects as well, where we're trying to make that connection between things that we pull out of the river and need to get to somewhere that it can be composted or utilized in the soil. And so, do you guys want me to plug that right now? We are actively looking for people to receive water stargrass that is harvested out of the river, because there's just a ton of it that gets pulled out. Tom, how much?
Last year it was 500,000 pounds.
500,000 pounds was pulled out last year, and it's great, wet mulch that gets, you can till it in. We've had people do it around their orchard or like under, they're not they're family orchards, smaller orchards, where they've told them, and they're like, yeah, it looks great, the next year. So there are opportunities for connecting people like that. At this point, we don't have that, but
Yeah, and that's a great segue into the soil health vineyard in Devon. I know this is something we talked about why we picked the composted manure. Do you want to talk on that for a second?
Yeah, so there is an incentives program right now to help cover compost expenses up to $1 million. This is actually a bigger problem than in Washington alone. I have a friend that does extension in North Carolina, and she's looking to set up a manure marketplace, right? So that manure can go from where it's produced to where it can be applied best. And it's a huge challenge. It has never been done well in the United States. That being said, the incentive program will help. Oftentimes, the biggest expense is shipping, right? It's $20 a ton and $600 for shipping. I think from my perspective, it's a legislative problem. We did pick dairy manure compost for use in our vineyard because we identified it as an important nutrient source to use in the Yakima Valley, right? There is a history of dairy manure challenges in this area. And if you can spread out the manure catchment to a larger area, you get less eutrophication in a small place, right? Less nutrient concentration, and that's what we're looking to do. But no, it hasn't been like well addressed. You bring up one of the biggest challenges.
Great, thank you. So with that, let's give Kelsi and Devon a big hand. All right,